Reborn in Bleach, Conquering Rukia, and Protecting the Soul Society. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 1. Flipping through the final words of the Grim Reaper manga on my mobile phone, when I saw that Rukia was finally with Koiji, and Ichigo was the ending with Inoue Orihime, as if the brain was struck by lightning and was close to going down, suddenly a small pop-up window popped up on the screen about the satisfaction survey of the Grim Reaper. Are you satisfied with the current ending of the Grim Reaper? Please rate it on a scale of 1 to 5. This kind of ending also deserves to be satisfying. His angry fingers slashed at each other, as if they were about to penetrate the phone screen. Do you like Rukia Kuchiji or Orihime Inoue? Without Rukia, the plot wouldn't have progressed. If you were given the chance, would you rewrite the story? That's for sure. What I do if I know the story must be much stronger than this ending. After the basic information is collected, the data is entered, and the world is generated. Welcome to start your story. When the last system message popped up on his phone, he lost consciousness. When he came back to his senses, he was surrounded by unfamiliar streets, and he was sure that he had never been here, but he felt very familiar, not immersive. Kuzacho? He muttered confusedly, a scene from the Grim Reaper, which he was all too familiar with. He turned his head to see a little girl lying on the ground, a huge monster with a strange mask on its head and a large hole in its chest, and Ichigo Kurosaki, a high school student with an orange hedgehog head, and Rukia Kuchiki, a petite black-haired beautiful girl with short hair. Just as he was recalling the plot of the first episode of the Grim Reaper, an emotionless mechanical voice came from his head. You have traveled to the world of death, and your current identity is Kurosaki Ryosuke, a survivor of Kurosaki Ichigo's cousin Shiba clan. The opinion system is on, and you can get random rewards by gaining the opinion of the target person. The novice quest is to gain Rukia's favor, with a time limit of 10 minutes, and completing it rewards Kurosaki Ichigo and Kuchiki Rukia with 0% favor, and if you fail, you will die. When the sound of the system disappeared, a blood-red countdown appeared in front of Zero's eyes. Time passed quickly, and he thought quickly in his mind, and it was no surprise that he should have really crossed over. It seems that he has come to the original plot of the Grim Reaper. Rukia gives Ichigo the power of the Grim Reaper, and it seems that the plot has reached the confrontation with the void, so the only way to gain Rukia's favor is to save the beauty of the hero. But looking at his empty information bar, except for the name, only one word that the power of the god of death has not been activated. It is completely a tabula rasa. It seems that there is only one chance, and I can only bet that I will not be so easy to take a fight. Ichigo Kurosaki on the side learned from Rukia that the fishbone void in front of him was aimed at his soul, and it was because of himself that his family was affected, and Rukia, who was attacked by sneak attack on the side, shouted, "Don't you want to get my soul? In that case, then go it alone with me. This has nothing to do with anyone else. Kill me if you have the ability, this idiot." Lucia shouted as she got up and prepared to stop her. Hearing Kurosaki Ichigo's provocation, Fishbone Void seemed to be amused. His eyes were bent into crescent moons, his mouth was grunting at 120 degrees, and his neck quickly stretched out and dragged a long saliva towards Kurosaki Ichigo. Rukia, who rushed out on the side, was about to be hit by the oncoming void, when a figure rushed out and hugged Rukia's petite and soft body tightly. It was Kurosaki Reisuke who protected Rukia with his body, and the huge mouth bit him on the back. The pain was so severe that Kurosaki almost fainted on the spot, and although he blocked the main damage for Rukia in his arms, he still injured Rukia's right hand holding the knife. Rukia quickly recovered from the shock, and didn't bother to clench her hands, and pulled her left palm from Kurosaki Zerosuke's arms to quickly chant in the void mouth. "O King's Landing, flesh masks, all things that fly high with wings, bearing the name of men, scorching heat and strife, rolling southward across the sea, marching forward, 31 red cannons of the broken road." The palm of his hand burst with red light, and the fire exploded in the void's mouth, and the scorching fire wave also hit Kurosaki Ryosuke's back, rushing him and Rukia in his arms to the side, and the fishbone void was hit hard by the blow just now, and it was holding its head and roaring at the sky in impotence and rage. "Ahem, are you all right?" Reisuke coughed up blood from his mouth, resisting the invasion of his body by the power of the void and the aftermath of the red artillery, and watched the countdown passing in front of him, and forced a word of concern out of his mouth. Rukia sat up from Zero's arms, looking at the man in front of him who was desperate for himself. Even if he was so seriously injured, he still cared about himself for the first time, and there was a faint fluctuation in his heart. Even if he didn't show it on his face at all, he pretended to be calm and asked, "Who are you?" Although Zero Jia couldn't feel Rukia's mental activity, the system helped Rukia show it, and the countdown in front of Zero stopped at 3 minutes and 21 seconds, and a system prompt that only he could hear echoed in his ears. Rukia's favorability is increased by 1%. The novice quest completion reward is 0.5% for Ichigo Kurosaki and Rukia's favorability, and Rukia's favorability reward is drawn as 1/5 of her death power will be distributed later, and the hidden quest is completed to obtain the power of the void, rewarding the hidden ability. More information will be displayed with use. But Ryosuke was about to ask the system if I could exchange the reward for healing when Ichigo's voice interrupted him. Cousin Zero, why are you here? You can also see the void and the Grim Reaper. Zero. Gia laughed angrily. Is this what should be asked at this time? I didn't see that I couldn't hold it anymore, and rolled my eyes in pain, as if I saw his late grandfather on the other side of the bridge beckoning to him. Rukia interrupted his questioning. Do you think that if you give up your soul, it will be satisfied and let us all go? It's a pity that even if he blocks the deadly attack for me, it's a pity that I can't fight it anymore, so everyone can only wait to become its food. Not far away, the void also regained his senses, roared and rushed over. Rukia saw this and directly stabbed the slashing knife into Ichigo's body without giving him time to hesitate. The white light flashed that there was only a small part of the slashing knife in Rukia's hand, and she stabbed the remaining part into the chest of Reisuke Kurosaki behind her, muttering in her mouth, Zero, that should save your life. Ding, successfully activate the power of death. The system's prompt sounded in Zero's mind. Episode 2. With the prompt, the description of the power of death in the status bar of Zero has changed. With the power of Rukia's Grim Reaper, the original Grim Reaper power of the original Shiba clan was stimulated, and the slashing knife has not yet been given its true name. Zerosuke's spirit body came out of his body, and the pain of his body stopped for a short time, and the outfit on his body changed into a black kimono, that is, the Death Reaper's work uniform, and he held an ordinary slashing knife in his hand. Ryosuke didn't rush forward to fight the void, because Ichigo, who had become the god of death one step ahead of him, was already carrying his huge slashing sword to fight the void. I've never seen Death's slashing blade so big. Who the hell is this guy? Rukia on the side looked at Ichigo, who was fighting with void inside. This battle was not like Zerosuke's memory. Ichigo easily wiped out the fishbone void with one sword. On the contrary, Ichigo fought quite hard, and the scars on Void's body recovered in a few seconds, while taking care of Kurosaki Yuko on the ground behind him. So he desperately resisted an inch. Just as Zero was doubting and thinking about countermeasures, the voice of the system sounded again. Due to your entry, the difficulty of the battle in this world has increased, and this battle is the first combat scene of the mission. Whether to open the novice demo. Zero looked at the transparent option in front of him, and naturally chose to turn it on, and then his body was no longer under his control, and the sound of the system sounded in his ears. The target fish has a weak bone, and the evaluation of the trash fish, although the strength and recovery of the flesh have been improved compared to the original, the weakness remains the same. When Ichigo used his slashing knife to block the head of the void elongation, Zero took 2 steps forward, slashed down the neck of the void, and slashed down the void's neck, slashing down one after another, attacking easily along the strong muscle texture, and the last blow pierced through the void's head to kill it. And as the void dissipated, Zerosuke retracted the knife at the same time. The newbie demo has ended, the object has been destroyed, a small amount of physical flexibility has been increased to activate the Kendo Foundation, and the main quest has entered a cooldown, and it will continue to open after 12 hours. As the sound of the system disappeared, Zero Gia regained control of his body from the bystanders at the same time, and he looked at the 2 people who were stunned and looked at him, and whispered embarrassedly with his index finger on his face. I used to learn Kendo. I don't remember you telling me. Okay, that's not the point. Hurry up and take the Wanderer and me back to deal with the wound. Please, I'm dying. Ryosuke pointed to the dying body under Rukia, and said tremblingly, when suddenly Ichigo's spirit eyes rolled and fell to the ground. Unlike Reisuke's labor-saving fighting style, the battle just now consumed too much Ichigo's physical strength. Hey, I'm the one who hurts the most. Zero couldn't help but complain, so he had to hold Yuko in one hand and drag Ichigo in the other hand to Rukia's side with difficulty. Death, are you alright? My name is Kurosaki Ryosuke, and that hedgehog head is my brother. His name is Kurosaki Ichigo. Zero asked as if it were the first time she had met Rukia, who had lost the power of death and was dressed in a white kimono. I'm not called Death, I'm Rukia Kuchiji. Most of my power was sucked away by the hedgehog's head, and I only left a small part to save your life, although you don't have the same good spiritual pressure talent as him, but the strength you showed surprised me. You've lost your strength now. I'm not worried that you're here. Come back with me to recuperate. No, just leave me here. Someone will pick me up soon. Rukia spoke. Just as Zero was thinking, a male voice came from behind him. Yo, it looks like I'm here at the right time, Miss Kuchiji, you seem to need help? At this moment, a middle-aged man with short light yellow hair, army green eyes, and a little stubble on his chin walked up, wearing a dark green short coat and light green clothes and pants, and wearing a green and white fisherman's hat and clogs under his feet, and was looking at the scene in front of him. Mr. Kasuke Urahara, you're here. If I may, I'd like to hear from you about the present situation. These 2 Grim Reapers, I don't seem to have seen them in this vicinity. To put it simply, I gave them the power of death as a last resort. Miss Kuchiji's actions are really eye-opening. I remember that it is a serious crime to give up the power of the god of death to humans in the corpse soul realm. Miss Kuchiji will not do it if she doesn't do it, and as soon as she does it, she will directly pass it on to 2 people, but she succeeded so easily. Hey, are you here to make fun of me? Come and help them heal first. As for those things, of course I know, and when I regain the power of death, I will naturally go back and take my responsibility. Rukia frowned slightly and opened her mouth in displeasure, and the system prompt suddenly sounded. Kasuke Urahara's opinion is increased by 1%, and he gets a small spiritual pressure boost, and he will not be rejected if his next trade with Kasuke Urahara does not violate the principle. He subconsciously looked at Kasuke Urahara, and Kasuke Urahara noticed that his gaze was only a soft smile, and it wasn't until he heard their subsequent conversation that Reisuke figured out why. Oops, I'm just kidding, Miss Rukia. As a long-term customer of our store, of course I hope that Miss Rukia will be okay, and the state of the spirit will not be so easy to recover, so I will provide you with a righteous corpse for free. Well, that's a problem for you. Zero Jia figured it out at this time. It was because of this incident that Rukia completely lost the power of death, and Kasuke Urahara happened to be able to give her the righteous body that hid the broken jade, and the biggest contributor to the realization of this plan was him and Ichigo. So Kasuke Urahara would have a good impression of the person who helped him, this old fox. So how do I get back to my body? Well, it's okay for you to let go of your will when you get close, but I don't recommend you to go back now, so I'll wait for me to treat your wounds first, this gentleman. Kasuke Urahara smiled at Zero. I'm Reisuke Kurosaki, you can just call me Reisuke. Okay, Mr. Reisuke, Kurosaki family. Kasuke Urahara muttered to himself as he helped everyone present begin to heal the wounds, including the Kurosaki Yuko who Ryosuke was holding, and the sound of the system sounded again. Side quests. Successful content debunks the plan to stop Kasuke Urahara's Honyu Honda. The quest rewards epic Honyu. Kasuke Urahara's favorability drops by 30, and it is expected to enter a hostile state, and completing this branch line is expected to open indigo dyeing related tasks. Whether to take the task. Zirosuke swallowed his saliva as he listened to the information, and looked at the options in front of him and didn't dare to choose. Episode 3. As a traverser, Zero Jia naturally knows what it means. This is an item that not only has its own super captain level death god spirit pressure, but also has a self-consciousness that can absorb and manifest the things that exist around him, and it is a veritable wishing machine. It was precisely because he clearly knew the value of Honyu that Zero Jia put away his desires, which were not something that he, a person who had just awakened the power of death, could covet. Remembering the increase in difficulty mentioned earlier, he didn't want to lose his life because of a moment of greed, so he finally pressed give up, praying that there would not be too much punishment for choosing to give up. Because of the choice to give up the acceleration of the plot direction, the sudden mission to destroy the Mantis Void, the number of enemies affected by the acceleration is doubled, and the reward remains unchanged. Rukia's 0.5% favorability. 0. GS side. Sure enough, there is still a punishment, but fortunately there are no outrageous requests such as fighting with Kasuke Urahara, and the only thing that is gratifying is that there is also a favorability reward. Rukia, who was tending to her wounds, rang the phone in her pocket. 10 minutes after the empty seat Hanmachi station, there is a void, and there is no choice but to let you go to Zero. Because I have now completely lost the power of the Grim Reaper, I need you to assist me in my mission of destroying the void and guiding souls into the corpse soul realm before I can regain my strength. Since Rukia has opened your mouth, I have no problem. Ichigo, Yuko, and my body are left to you. No problem, I'll send it to Mr. Zero's house after I've treated the wound. Kasuke Urahara said with an okay gesture. Rukia looked at the back of Zero Jia leaving, thinking that it would take a little more to ask the other party to take over the job of the Grim Reaper, but she didn't expect to agree so easily. Obviously she was a stranger who had just met for a short time, and she was seriously injured for herself just now. Mr. Zirosuke, is there no problem, right? As a person who has just gained the power of death, he will continue to fight. His words should be fine. That's right, it's clear that Mr. Zero is not as good as the fallen one from the spiritual pressure, but I didn't see the exhaustion on his face. Maybe he was born to dry the Grim Reaper. Kasuke Urahara quipped. While Ryosuke was in a hurry, he regretted that he had taken on the task alone, and he should try to ask the store manager Urahara to help, although 9 times out of 10 he would prevaricate with various reasons. The northwest should be in this direction, because he saw Ryuki Arisawa returning home on the way to the road, with the clinic of the Kurosaki Ichigo family as the midpoint. The Arisawa family was in the northwest, and the Kusa Hanmachi station was further northwest, and the direction was right, and Ryosuke quickened his pace. What catches your eye is 2 huge monsters with a body size of nearly 3 meters like a praying mantis. The 2 front paws are the same as the praying mantis. It's completely the shape of 2 sickles. The identity of the monster is needless to say that it's the protagonist of the mission, the Mantis Void. They slashed wantonly, and some of the victims also had spirits, and the spirits and flesh shattered like cicada wings under their scythes, slashing and devouring. Because ordinary people could not see such a monster, even if the sickle had flashed cold light in front of them. Ryosuke looked at the station that had become a purgatory on Earth, and he felt his stomach tumbling. This scene was far more tragic than he remembered, and it was so real in front of him. "Can you save my daughter?" Ryosuke looked at the person who spoke. It was a mother whose clothes had already been dyed red, and she was holding her young daughter tightly in her arms, but Ryosuke saw another pair not far behind them. The sudden change made them unable to realize the fact that they were dead, and it was precisely because they died and became spirits that they could see the current state of death. He silently walked over and took the sword back, and with the end of the handle of the sword, he pressed the forehead of the mother and the daughter in her arms. It's okay, you've done a good job, ma'am. Thank you." Zero Jia used soul burial on the souls of the two, which was a method of extraditing the souls to the corpse soul realm, and the body of the mother and daughter dissipated and turned into two black butterflies, one large and one small, and flew to the corpse soul realm. It wasn't until this time that Zero Jia really realized that this was not a dream or a game, and that people here were flesh and blood, and he also realized the weight of life. Your sense of identity with the world goes up, and you gain a little bit of physical control. He didn't pay attention to the system's prompts, and at this time a wave of anger churned in Zero's heart, and he asked himself if he was a saint, but he couldn't accept that the fresh life was disappearing like this in front of his eyes, and they had the right to live, which was not a sin that they should bear. He regained his grip on the slashing knife, and instantly burst out and stopped the pair of scythes that were about to slash at the passerby, and then slashed with both hands, cutting off the pair of scythes at the root. Because of the pain the mantis held in anger. "The proficiency of kendo has risen, your understanding of kendo has deepened? Is taking effect. Soon, another mantis void also discovered the enemy. A pair of scythes flew out and attacked Zero. Under the cover of the attack, the injured mantis void pounced on a spirit on the side and began to eat, and the white tissue at the fracture wriggled and regenerated rapidly. "Bastard, stop me!" Zerosuk was enraged by the mantis's gnawing behavior, and the pair of scythes that stood in his way didn't intend to let him go, and unleashed a fierce attack like a raging wave. "The effect of has been improved. Help me," was the last voice of the gnawed spirit in the world, the last straw that crushed his sanity, and he gave up on resisting the pair of scythes, allowing them to cut 2 deep wounds on his body, and through his own slashing knife with his right hand. The spinning blade easily severed the mantis's weak head, and then slammed into the ground. Then he sideways dodged the follow-up attack of the 2 elongated scythes, rushed towards the body of the mantis void, and spread the palm of his left hand to its head. And the mantis void saw this and directly swallowed his palm into his mouth and bit his wrist. "O King's Landing, mask of flesh and blood, Vientiane, wings flying, bearing the name of a man, scorching heat and strife, rolling southward across the sea, marching forward. Breaking the road number 31 Red Artillery." This was his first attempt at using the red artillery, and he succeeded in failing and succeeding, and the success was that he eliminated the upper half of the mantis and blew it directly into ashes. And the failure was that Zerosuk's left hand was also seriously injured. Mission completion. Rukia's opinion has increased, and her current opinion is 1.5%. Your proficiency in has gone up. 31 red artillery proficiency has increased. After Zerosuk confirmed that he had eliminated all the voids, he dragged his injured body with great difficulty to pick up the sword and buried the souls that were still alive one by one. The more guilty he felt that maybe he had been earlier, that he had been stronger, that he had blamed himself for everything, and that he had lost his strength and sat down against the wall. Ryosuke saw 2 people walking towards him not far away, led by a girl with short tail hair, dark purple eyes, and a single bundle of bangs hanging down to his forehead, walking towards him in a white kimono, followed by a man wearing a fisherman's hat. "It's all my fault, if I am." Ryosuke finally didn't finish everything he wanted to say, and he passed out due to the pain and loss of strength, and his body was about to smash to the side, but Rukia quickly stepped forward and hugged him. "You don't have to take all the blame on yourself, you've done a good job." Although at this time, Zero Jia can no longer be heard. Episode 4. Ryosuke had a dream in which he saw the fish bone that had bitten him, and he slashed at its head with the same sword as before, but unlike before, only its mask was cut off in the dream, and his own face was reflected under the mask. Frightened, Zero tried to slash it again, but found that the slashing knife in his hand was gone, and his body could not be controlled, and a very unfamiliar voice came from the empty mouth with Zero's face. "Look, you can't do anything." The scene in front of Zero's eyes changed, and he came to Kusa Hanmachi Station again. This time he couldn't stop anything, and the void with Zero's face joined the slaughter of the 2 praying mantises. Wailing and screaming, mixed with that false taunt, in his dreams, Zero couldn't even close his eyes and plug his ears. "Admit it, you can't do anything. Help me, big brother, help me. Why don't you save me?" Countless, screaming souls dragged their mutilated bodies and crawled towards him, crawling over his body, stimulating his spirit, and his tears flowed uncontrollably. I'm sorry, it's all my fault, I couldn't save you. Brother, wake up. Why are you so ugly, brother?" Ryosuke finally opened his eyes, and it was Ichigo Kurosaki who came to his room and shook him out of his sleep. The power of went up. Although the system's prompt is still presented with a question mark, Zero already has the answer in his heart, and this power is not surprisingly empty. But he was a little strange. The fishbone void that hurt himself was just a very ordinary void, and he shouldn't have such a strong ability after being destroyed. And his thoughts were explained by the system's perception. Because your body is the carrier of the system, the forces in your body will be corrected by the system, including the power of the void. Originally, the ability to be a question mark showed information from the erosion of the void, and the process was irreversible with the erosion to increase part of the strength. Brother, are you okay? Do you remember what happened last night? Ichigo asked tentatively. Remember, I understand you a little bit. What do you understand me? Ryosuke just shook his head and didn't answer. He understood Ichigo's guilt for blaming his mother's death on himself. Hurry up and get up late. Are you going to be late on the first day of transfer? Oh. Ryosuke hurriedly washed up, changed into his school uniform, and was dragged out of the house by Ichigo. Ichigo and Ryosuke, you guys eat casually on the way. I didn't prepare breakfast in the morning when I contacted about repairing the wall. Oh, but it's okay. The whole truck rushed into the house, and everyone was safe, but unfortunately, the prisoner ran away for him. Kurosaki Ichigo's father, Kurosaki Ishin, complained while calling the construction crew. What a car accident, wasn't it last night and %#. Okay uncle, let's go first. Ryosuke forcibly covered Ichigo's mouth and dragged him away. Huh, what are you doing? It was obviously that virtual monster last night. How can there be any truck? Uncle and Wanderer Xiali are fine. It's good to be a truck. There's no need to remember that kind of terrible thing. That's the way it is. Forget it. It's probably what the Grim Reaper did yesterday do. Since it's all solved, she should also go back to the corpse soul realm. For Lingjia, who knew the truth, he just smiled and didn't answer. Ichigo and Ryosuke arrive at the classroom to find everyone talking about the Kurosaki family's car accident yesterday. Ichigo might be taking a leave of absence today, and his house has a big hole, as if he was hit by an entire truck in the middle of the night. Kojima Mizu's said to everyone, Truck, is he hurt, or is he dead? Ichigo knocked Ryuki Arisawa with his school bag. I'm fine, my family is safe, it's a pity. Kurosaki-san, you're early, who is this one next to you? Asked Orihime Inoue, looking at Ryosuke beside Ichigo. He's my cousin Kurosaki Zirasuke. I just transferred to another school today. Brother, she's Inoue Orihime. This is Ryuki Arisawa. This is Kojima Mizu's. Ichigo was halfway through his introduction, and suddenly found a familiar figure speechless, and Mizuki introduced. Ah, she's also a transfer student who just came to report today. Kurosaki-san, please advise. You. Why are you here? Kurosaki, I don't have a textbook yet. Can you take me to get it? Said Rukia as she held out her hand, saying that if you say it, she will kill you. The main quest is opened. Assist Rukia to convince Kurosaki Ichigo to perform the Grim Reaper duty. Reward Kurosaki Ichigo Rukia's favorability increase. Increase the spiritual pressure and physical energy slightly, and if you fail, you will be transferred. Ichigo took the two of them up to the rooftop, and only after confirming that there was no one else on the rooftop did he speak. Isn't the void already destroyed? Why do you still want to get mixed up in our class? Why didn't you go back to the corpse soul realm? Are you stupid? Only the Grim Reaper can return to the corpse soul realm. My power has been given to you, and I have lost the ability of the Grim Reaper. In short, during the time when I have recovered the ability of the Grim Reaper, I need to ask you to help me complete the mission of the Grim Reaper. I don't want to, yesterday, because it attacked my family, and I'm not strong enough to do this. In that case, don't blame me. In the face of Ichigo's refusal, Rukia put on a glove that could push the spirit out of the body, and Ryosuke silently set up Ichigo from the back door when he saw this. Brother, what are you doing? Why am I out of my body again? Zirasuke, who had also entered the state of death, pulled up Ichigo and said, Okay, let's go here and then make a decision. Where's the location this time? 10 minutes later, Yuzawa Children's Park. Brother, how do I feel that you are very familiar with her? What happened last night? Nope. Ryosuke and Rukia denied it in unison, and Ichigo simply stopped asking questions and arrived at the Yuzawa Children's Park, only to see a huge spider chasing after a child's soul, devouring the soul of another middle-aged man in its mouth. The boy was a soul Ichigo knew, and he had often seen him in the park, though he hadn't spoken to him. Aha, help me! Ichigo and Reisuke drew their swords at the same time and slashed at two of the spider's 6 giant feet, and after losing both legs, it did not panic. But after devouring the soul of a middle-aged man, it was reborn with a severed limb and 2 mantis arms growing out of its abdomen, and it spoke. Don't get in my way, weak Grim Reaper. Be careful, reminded Rukia behind her. The power of the void takes effect. The spider's face overlapped with the face of himself in the dream, and the attack in front of him became slow, and the sword painting full moon slashed off the attacking feet and mantis arms with a single blow, and then turned his wrist and cut off the virtual mask, and the knife in his hand froze when he saw that the face under the mask was not his own. Brother! Spider Void seized the gap, and another pair of feet blasted out towards the two. Ichigo blocked the attack on himself, but it was too late to help Zirasuke. Zero-Gia recovered his spirit after hearing Ichigo's shout, and ate a blow to his body and flew out upside down, and at the same time, his wrist shot out a slashing knife, directly hitting Spider-Void's face door to destroy it. Rukia rushed out to catch Zero's body, and he felt the tiny body that caught him. Stupid, don't be stubborn, it's not your responsibility. Yes. Episode 5. Ryosuke patted Rukia's hand and signaled that she was okay to let go. Brother is alright? It's okay, but our work isn't over yet. Ryosuke walked over to Ichigo, pulled out the sword he had planted in the ground, and used the end of the handle of the sword to lightly press the forehead of the spirit, and buried the soul of the little boy. Daddy, he turned into a monster and wanted to eat me, saying that we could be together forever. But I was so scared. Daddy, 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 he wooed. Zero said, touching the little boy's head. I didn't destroy your father, but I washed away the sins he committed when he became a monster, and I have led him to that world, and now I will guide you to meet him there. Really, thank you. The boy's body completely disappeared and turned into a black butterfly and flew to the corpse soul realm. Although Zero Jia did not believe in gods and Buddhas, he still folded his hands and prayed for them. He knew that the souls in the corpse soul realm did not all live a life of food and clothing, but at least they were still alive and hoped that they could meet. Ichigo, do you know, in fact, after destroying that void last night, I also went to Kuzahanmachi Station to fight 2 mantis-like voids. Although I destroyed them, I was not able to save the people there. Many lives were lost before my eyes, and I was not able to save them. I was actually very jealous of you. If I could have your power, I would have saved them, definitely. Didn't you ask me in the morning why my face was so ugly? Because I dreamed of those people, and they were complaining about why I couldn't save them, why they weren't the ones who survived. So can you help me? Ichigo twisted his eyes away from Zirosuke, and he ran away, because those eyes contained some kind of emotion that was too heavy to be overcome. Ichigo was silent. He remembered the rainy day he had had, and when he thought of his mother, this feeling was similar to what he saw in Ryo's eyes. But this kind of emotion could not be compared to the depths of his understanding. Although this is the second time Ichigo has fought as a god of death, there are some things that he can understand without guidance, and although he doesn't know how strong his spiritual pressure is, there is one thing he can feel, which is much weaker than his own spiritual pressure. Ichigo closed his eyes, calmed down, and looked at Rukia. I'm not the kind of person who would sacrifice his life to save someone I've never met, but I'm not ungrateful. It's your power of death that saved us, and I won't let my brother carry such a heavy thing alone. So, I'll also help with your Grim Reaper's work, and it's mainly for my brother's sake. Okay, then I'll trouble you from now on. The main quest was completed, and Kurosaki Ichigo was successfully persuaded to perform the Grim Reaper duty. Kurosaki Ichigo Rukia's favorability increased, and the spiritual pressure physical energy increased slightly. Kurosaki Ichigo's current opinion is 1%, and his opinion rewards him with a small amount of spiritual pressure, and Rukia's current opinion is 2 and 5%. Note, the favor reward is the first time to reach 1%, and a multiple of 5. Zero Jia felt the changes in his body, but his heart was uneasy. In this strengthened world, how strong is the Void and the captain-level Grim Reaper? You need to hurry up. And how many lives will disappear in the future when Ishida Yulong uses the bait of the Void? Zero Jia secretly decided to do his best, and he would never let this kind of thing happen. The main quest goes on cooldown, and it will continue to open after 12 hours. Zero thought for a moment and was ready to use the previous reward of Kasuke Urahara. Then I'll go out for a trip. I'll go back before dinner. Ichigo, help me when you go back. Ah, brother, where are you going? It's a bit of a personal matter. You should familiarize yourself with your power now. Otherwise I will save you next time. With that, he left as a Grim Reaper, running towards the location of the Urahara store in his memory. He knocked on the door of the store, and the door was opened by a very tall, reflective glasses uncle holding several boxes of goods. This person was forced to leave the corpse soul world with Urahara Kasuke because of the Jade Collapse incident, and the former commander of the Ghost Path was holding Ling Taijai. What do you have to do? I'm looking for Kasuke Urahara. Is he there? He's inside. You can go in. Thank you, Mr. Taijai. He was stunned for a moment, looked at the back of Zero Jia's departure, and secretly thought that he didn't seem to have reported his name just now. Isn't this Mr. Zero, a rare guest? Is there anything going on here? Kasuke Urahara looked at Reisuke with interest as he played with his small fan. Manager Urahara, I want to talk to you about something alone. Ryosuke looked at Hanakari Shida and Tsuya Yu, who were peeking on the side, and then at Kiriyo Taisai, who was sorting out the goods behind him. Oh, Mr. Zero's words have piqued my interest. Can you tell me about something in advance? Kasuke Urahara asked jokingly, curious to see what the young man who had just gained the power of death wanted to say. He had to be alone. Zero Jia just said a sentence through his mouth, and Kasuke Urahara's face changed all at once, and he fanned his fan and stared at Zero Jia silently. Kasuke Urahara has become hostile to you, and if you can't dispel the hostility for 10 minutes, your friendship will start to decrease. Zirosuke heard the system's prompt, and he also knew that his move was risky, and he was gambling. You can talk to me alone, okay? Taijai closed the door, watched the carry lady and the reign of the house, and no one was allowed to come down, no matter how much movement occurred. There was no banter in Urahara Kasuke's voice, and he gave the order coldly. For Urahara Kasuke's order, he could naturally read the meaning of it, not literally closing the door of the store but letting him block the meaning of this place. He was a little surprised to look at the god of death in front of him who was not strong in spiritual pressure. Kasuke Urahara opened the hidden compartment hidden in the floor, and the dark compartment was a huge hole in the ground where a long ladder led to the bottom of Urahara's store, and Kasuke Urahara motioned to Zero to go down first with a cold face, and Zero did so. The huge cavern was desolate, with only a few dry branches, and after confirming that Zero had reached the bottom of the cave, Kasuke Urahara closed the exit of the dark grid and plunged down. You say the lip sync again, there is no one else this time, I need to make sure. Guanyin opened the red G-change. Reisuke Kurosaki said, the thundering carriage, the gap in the spinning wheel, this thing has light and is divided into 61 of the binding path, 6 sticks of light. 6 huge pieces of light pierced through Zerosuke's body and locked him firmly, and the huge spiritual pressure emitted by Kasuke Urahara made him breathless, and the double-bladed cane knife in Kasuke Urahara's assistant also pressed against his jaw. Mr. Zero, I want you to think carefully about everything you are going to say next. Kasuke Urahara has developed murderous intent towards you. Episode 6. Zerosuke knew that this would be the result when he reported Urahara Kasuke's swastika cannon Kai Honheim, because Urahara Kasuke had never used it in front of people until that future battle. But this is already the only candidate that Zero can think of, and the 3 captain-level people he can contact at the moment are Urahara Kasuke, Kurosaki Ishin, and Tsuruyo Tetsusai. Tsuri Tiejai is the former commander of the Ghost Path, and the head of the Big Ghost Road, and Zero is not Ichigo, and he doesn't have so much spiritual pressure to support the consumption of the Ghost Way. Kurosaki has been hiding his strength and doesn't want to expose his strength too soon. Then the only remaining candidates are Urahara Kasuke, who is as smart as Aizen, but it's because he's too smart that Zero intends to tell the truth. Because Zero Jia was scared, after a few battles, he recognized the difference between this world and the world of death in his memory, and the difficulty increased by more than 1.5 stars, and it seemed that he had solved the void by himself, but he knew that he was about to touch his limit now. Unlike Ichigo Kurosaki, who has a large amount of spiritual pressure that can be squandered wantonly, and the power of the death god void in his body that can be tapped, Ryosuke hopes that he can at least master the initial solution of the slashing sword before the rain dragon causes a large number of void attacks in the present world, so as to reduce casualties. Manager, have you ever known the ability to foresee? Or rather, I know the future that is similar to the future, a future that is close to the outcome of the future. Kasuke Urahara muttered the word. It also includes the past, your past as the captain of the 12th team of the former Guardian Court and the first director of the Technology Development Bureau, but I can't see myself in that ability. Warning, please don't continue to reveal anything related to the main story. The world's cause and effect distortion will bring irreversible changes, and the increase in difficulty will be unpredictable. The system's warning echoed in Zero's mind. These are not enough proof. As long as the investigation is detailed enough, it is still possible to obtain such information. I will give you one last chance to say a word, let me believe you otherwise. Spirit King, you accept and abide by the Spirit King's consciousness and position, and Kurita and Sasaya Rain are also containers that you have prepared to replace the Spirit King just in case. Zero Jia had already shouted this sentence with the consciousness of death. Kasuke Urahara put away the spiritual pressure, and at the same time lifted the 61 canes of the bound path, and Ryosuke knelt on the ground and gasped for breath, and Kasuke Urahara's crutch knife was not retracted, leaving a blood line on Ryo's neck. Actually, after meeting you last night, I've been investigating you. You're very strange as if you appeared out of thin air, but you are indeed reasonable in itself, a survivor of the fall of the Shiba clan in Shiba Lingsuk. The power of death wrapped in Ichigo Kurosaki's body now is given by Rukia, and the power of death in your body is awakened by Rukia's power, and you can also feel something like nothingness in you. Kasuke Urahara temporarily dispelled his murderous intent and hostility towards you, and replaced it with doubt. The system prompt rang at the right time. You do know a lot. Exposing your abilities and provoking me to kill you is certainly not your purpose. Tell me what you want from me in exchange for taking risks and exposing your secrets. You may think I'm a hypocrite, but I hope you can help me become stronger, at least have the ability to protect others, and deal with the many disasters that will happen in the near future. Why not try to say what you know about your future needs, but choose this way? You should know that you are weak, and that it is not better for you to deal with it through someone else's hands. I know I'm weak. The near future I can foresee is set. The world will go worse with too much change, and I don't want too many innocent people to die. Ryosuke looked up at Kasuke Urahara. How did the store manager Urahara ever open his mouth to outsiders? Aren't you also afraid of the unknown of human nature? Kasuke Urahara was silent for a moment before speaking. I see, it makes sense. Is it hypocrisy? I don't hate it. Kasuke Urahara stared into Kurosaki Reisuke's eyes, trying to find something, and motioned for Ryosuke to continue. I want you to teach me how to cut the sword and liberate. Kasuke Urahara's favorability bonus takes effect, and Kasuke Urahara's vigilance decreases slightly. Since you know me so well, you should know how I teach, right? Ryosuke stood up, took a few steps back and grasped the sword, staring at Kasuke Urahara without slacking off. Ryosuke felt that the other party would control the power, but he was not so sure. Be careful not to die, scream, Urahime. The double-edged cane knife in Urahara Key's assistant transforms into a thinner, no gauntlet, red knot where there should be a gauntlet, and a bend at the end of the hilt. With the swing of liberation, the slashing blade released a blood-like substance, and the crimson substance turned into a crescent-shaped blade, flying out of the blade to attack Zirosuke. Zirosuke barely managed to resist with his sword, but to no avail, the crimson crescent moon swept over and slashed the sword in his hand, leaving a bloody trail on his left shoulder. A hint of disappointment flashed in Kasuke Urahara's eyes, although he could clearly feel Zirosuke's strength, but it was still too weak, and as he was thinking about how to restrain the force attack next, Zirosuke shouted, 61 of the bound path, 6 sticks of light. 6 huge pieces of light pierced through Kasuke Urahara's body, and Zero continued to chant, O King's Landing, the mask of flesh, the Vientiane, the wings flying high. As he was halfway through his chant of the 31 red cannon, the light of the 6 staffs of light shattered, and Kasuke Urahara appeared in front of him, kicking him hard in the abdomen, and Zirosuke's body flew upside down and smashed against the rocks beside him. You should know that the ghost path that doesn't chant is only 3/10 of the strength, and you can't expect to be able to control me with your poor spiritual pressure, right? You came to me to learn the liberation of the sword slasher, why don't you even dare to swing the sword? Kasuke Urahara stood in place and reprimanded, not continuing to attack. Zirosuke barely stabilized his body by holding on to the rock, and really felt the gap with the captain level with his body. Even if he restrained the strength of a simple attack, he could kill himself. The power of the void takes effect. If that's all you have, maybe it's better to kill you, because you know too much. As he spoke, Kasuke Urahara gently waved the red hime and shot out the crimson crescent again. To meet the requirements of the first solution of the slashing knife, the captain level guidance and the threat to life are achieved, and the demonstration of the effect of the slashing knife is entered. Cry, Nameless Thousand Faces. Zero Jia swung the sword Nameless Thousand Faces, and also shot out a slightly smaller red crescent similar to the opponent's crimson crescent, and the two crescents collided, slightly changing the opponent's trajectory, shooting at the rock above Zirosuke, bringing a large amount of smoke and dust with it. The smoke and dust dissipated, and Kasuke Urahara narrowed his eyes, carefully looking at the sword named Nameless Thousand Faces liberated in Zirosuke's hand. The blade is thinner, there is no gauntlet, there is a red knot where there should be a gauntlet, and there is a bend at the end of the hilt, which is no different from the red G in his hand. Interesting. With the system taking control of the body, there is a lot of information about the Nameless Thousand Faces of the slashing knife. Chopping knife, Nameless Thousand Faces, state initial solution. Initial solution effect can copy the initial solution and ability of all chopping knives, and only one chopping knife initial solution can be copied at the same time, and the current copy object is red hime. Your Reaper's abilities, unlike those in the current world, are generated by the system, so your slasher Nameless Thousand Faces is not self-aware, it is a pure weapon, and it only needs to achieve a certain combination of conditions to learn to liberate. So what are the conditions for the solution? Asked Zirosuke. The condition of the swastika is, please explore it yourself. Back to reality, Kasuke Urahara didn't mean to stop practicing out of curiosity, and for this reason he didn't take the initiative to attack, but waited for what kind of attack Zero would make with that fake magenta. Kasuke Urahara is becoming more and more curious about you, and his favorability has increased slightly, and it is currently 1.2%. At this time, the zero medium of the body controlled by the system moved, and the force of the foot stepped on the ground and ejected out of the tiny cracks. Use the power of the void to boost. 0. Jia waved the Nameless Thousand Faces, and the blade emitted a black net-like spirit pressure towards Urahara Kasuke. Urahara Kasuke cut the black net out of curiosity if this was real, and as the black net was cut off, countless small fireballs were born on the net and detonated continuously. The explosion brought up a large amount of smoke but did not cause damage to Kasuke Urahara, and at this point Zero was already in front of Urahara and exchanged 2 knives. Raise your head, Nameless. As Zero Jia recited the new liberation language, the slashing knife in his hand also changed from Hongji to a fingerhook knife. Nameless Thousand Faces, copying objects change Wabasuk, the ability to continue to double the weight of the slashed object. Kasuke Urahara's eyes lit up, and he noticed that the weight of Honghime had obviously changed after the confrontation with the nameless Senmian at this time, and in his memory, this was the ability of the current vice-captain of the Sanbin team, Kira Izuru, to slash the sword. In order to encourage you to interact more outside of the main story, you will resonate with Honghime, convey your emotions, and deepen Kasuke Urahara's trust in you. That's what the system conveys. From the resonance of the 2 slashing knives, Kasuke Urahara saw the scene that Zero saw at Kuza Hanmachi Station, and his feelings of self-blame and guilt at that time. Urahara Kasuke felt the message from the resonance, and the red G in his hand had become extremely heavy under several encounters, and the gravity suddenly recovered at the time of a slash, giving him half a second of stagnation in the control of the knife, and it was this half second that he caught a glimpse of Zirosuke's knife changing again, and did not pronounce the words of liberation. Turning into the form of a short knife, the blade instantly stretched out and stabbed at Kasuke Urahara's heart, but Kasuke Urahara's figure had already appeared a few meters away. Nameless Thousand Faces, replicating object transformation spear, the blade can be extended and changed in length to assassinate opponents in an instant, and its attack speed and strength can be enhanced, using it like a whip, and the maximum extension limit is 100 times the length of the blade. Okay, it seems that you have also mastered the use of liberation. What an interesting ability. Kasuke Urahara patted the dust on his body and said easily, it was no longer as cold as before. At the end of the demonstration at the beginning of the slashing knife, summarize one ability at a time, and replace the previous ability with the copy object. In view of the current spiritual pressure strength, it is recommended to copy the ability of the physics department. 0. Regained control of his body, exhaustion and detachment hit instantly, and Nameless Thousand Faces turned into a normal state and fell to the ground, holding his knees with his hands and gasping for air. I'm definitely starting to believe what you're saying, about the information you can snoop on, and the reasons why you want to be stronger. Haha, I didn't lie to you about these things. Zero gasped and replied in fits and starts. Even if you say this now, I don't fully trust you. Be glad that you are weak, otherwise I may kill you directly. Your uncertainty is too dangerous for this world. You don't need me to remind you. Keep your mouth shut. Reisuke was silent and didn't reply, and Kasuke Urahara simply treated Ryosuke's wound before picking him up and jumping back into the store. Tsuruyo looked at the two who came back from the hollow, and handed Kasuke Urahara an inquiring look, but Urahara just closed the fan and put it in front of his mouth to signal not to worry. Until the two of them sent Kurosaki Zirosuke away, until they couldn't see the back, they couldn't help but ask, Your Excellency. Kasuke Urahara thought about the words and spoke. An interesting rotten good guy, probably. Kasuke Urahara doesn't plan to share these things with anyone else for the time being, because there are too many secrets involved, especially about the Spirit King. Episode 7. Shifting back to Rukia and Ichigo at the Yuzawa Children's Park, Rukia flipped through the novels of the present world and laughed from time to time. Ichigo was practicing the slashing knife at the automatic ball-throwing machine brought by Rukia, and it happened that there were not many people staying at the Yuzawa Children's Park on a weekday afternoon, otherwise the ball shot by the ball machine would have been strangely split into two petals. I said I was going to help me with special training, but I was reading novels over there. I'm also learning how you people communicate in this world, okay? Does learning mean watching that kind of weird romance novel? Is your special training over? It's long over. Don't you want me to hit those pepper balls in a row? Stupid, it's only ordinary balls with pepper. Ordinary balls? That's right, did you hit every single one? Didn't you let you see clearly and then cut into the ball with a virtual drawing? I didn't understand what you were going to special training for. How did I get out of this children's drawing you drew? The weakness of the weakness is the head. As long as you cut the head, you can destroy it, and Zero Jia is very good at handling it. Please, you didn't say that. The special training is to train you to be able to accurately cut off the head of the void no matter what the situation, instead of swinging it around with your big knife. Obviously you took almost all of my strength, but in the end you have to hide behind Zero. The greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. I know, of course I don't want my brother to take everything, but why do you keep mentioning him? Is there one? Rukia's mind couldn't help but think back to that night, and Zero was trying to protect herself. You don't like him, do you? No. Ichigo looked like Rukia didn't want to pay attention to you, as if her secret had been revealed. After Ryosuke left the Urahara store, he saw that it was still early in the morning and was about to go to the Yuzawa Children's Park to join up with Ichigo Rukia, and his mind was constantly recalling each of the slashing knives that appeared in the original work and its corresponding abilities to prepare for the battle that followed. He suddenly saw that on the zebra crossing in front of him, Inoue Orihime was carrying a bag of vegetables across the road, and a car was speeding up, and he quickly searched his memory, and Inoue Orihime's brother, who had become virtual in the original story, would save her. At the same time, a giant hand waved at Inoue, more like wanting to end her life before the speeding car than saving people. Because your strength has increased significantly, the main line freeze time has been lifted, and the mission content kills Orihime's brother who has been virtualized, and successfully rewards Ichigo Kurosaki, Orihime Inoue, and Rukia Kuchiji, as well as a small amount of spiritual pressure, and if you fail, you die. When Zero Jia drew his knife and rushed out, the system's prompt also sounded, and he picked up Inoue Orihime with his left hand and waved the knife with his right hand to resist the attack of the void, and the void retracted into another space after the attack failed, and then Inoue Orihime in Zero Jia's arms opened his mouth. Zero-san, you can see me? Zirosuke was taken aback. Then can you put me down first? Inoue said with a slightly red face, and Ryosuke put down Inoue's atmosphere was slightly embarrassed. Orihime Inoue's favorability has risen, and it is currently 0.5%. Brother! Ichigo's voice broke the awkward atmosphere at this time. "Why are you here?" asked Ryosuke, looking at Ichigo and Rukia, who had arrived. Rukia said she sensed something empty here, and we came over. Ichigo whispered in Zero's ear. "Brother, where did you go just now? Why were you injured again?" Ryosuke avoided the topic with a haha, and Ichigo didn't delve into it further. "You go back first, and I'll take care of the matter here. But, I know you want to protect me, but how can I grow under your wings, and don't carry everything alone?" Ryosuke looked at Ichigo's determined eyes. This mission didn't show that there was a time limit, and it was true that as Ichigo said, he couldn't do everything. After all, Ichigo had the aura of the protagonist and it was not easy to have an accident. "Okay, be careful. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions." Although he was worried, he did not refuse, and after saying goodbye to everyone, he returned home. When the spirit returned to the physical body, the wound on his shoulder did not appear on the body, and he saw Kurosaki Ichishin smoking at the door of his house, and saw Zero come back and speak. "How's it going, uncle? What do you mean?" He took a hard breath and spat out the smoke ring. "I can understand your eagerness to gain enough power to protect others, don't rush it." Zero was shocked by what Ichishin said, but it didn't make sense. How could he know this? And he wanted to prevaricate in the end, and before he could open his mouth, he continued to speak on his own. "Actually, I followed you earlier than Urahara and the others that night, and I saw the matter of Hanmachi Station from the beginning to the end, so you don't need to continue to hide it from me. The thing I regret the most in my life is that I didn't save Misaki and the destruction of my missing family during that period. I also suspected your sudden appearance, but I was quickly relieved, and there is nothing more important than being alive." Zero opened his mouth to explain something, but Kurosaki stopped him with a gesture and took a sip and continued. "Urahara just told me something else about you, although he definitely kept something, but it doesn't matter. Is there any information about the fall of the Shiba family in the information you know? Don't you know? Then forget about it. Don't reveal your identity as Shiba in the future. That unsuccessful Ichigo may have to worry more about your usual time. You should be able to understand my difficulties more or less, right?" Kurosaki said as he stroked Zirasuke's head with his rough hand. "I'm sorry about your parents. These things still have to be kept secret from Ichigo. In fact, I still hope that he can live as an ordinary person, and this will be your home from now on, my nephew." Unlock Kurosaki's single-minded favorability, which is currently 100%, rewarding 1/10 of Kurosaki's total spiritual pressure, and evaluating 1/10 of the spiritual pressure as the original Juban team captain is also very powerful. Zero Mind's heart warms. 100% favorability shows that Isin really trusts himself completely. He has actually avoided recalling the original world since he crossed over, and it seems that under the influence of the system, he only retains the memory of the god of death. When Isin expressed his feelings and said that this would be your home from now on, Zero's eyes turned red instantly, but at this moment, he felt that another powerful void appeared, and he also received a message from Rukia on his phone. "Come over when there's a situation." Yishin patted Ryosuke's shoulder and said, "Go ahead, Ichigo. Please, I'll keep dinner for you." Episode 8. When Ryosuke runs to the vicinity of Inoue's house, he sees a large hole on the second floor of her house, and Ichigo and two praying mantis are facing each other on the street. An explosion came from the second floor and kicked up smoke, and Rukia's figure flew out of it, and Zero jumped up to catch her. "You're all right, what's going on?" "It's dangerous that Inoue's soul has been detached from the body, but that void is very strong," Rukia in her arms said eagerly, and Zero took the initiative to break away from the righteous corpse and enter the state of death. Originally, Zero was going to directly liberate Nameless Thousand Faces and shoot the void with a magic spear, but just when he wanted to make a move, a system prompt stopped his thoughts. "Someone is curious about you and looking forward to what you're going to do next." Ryosuke suddenly remembered that Aizen had been monitoring Ichigo's growth in the corpse soul realm, and he must have discovered this character who was not in the plan. He almost showed the ability of the Ikamaru silver spear in front of him, and it was bound to attract the necessary attention from him, because the same slashing sword was not allowed to exist in the central 46th room. But at this time, he didn't have time to think about this, so he had to go up to save Inoue Orihime first, and when he turned into death, he reached out and picked up Rukia. "Hold on, yes." Jumping up to the second floor, he saw at a glance the snake body that was holding Yizlangue. Its huge body occupied almost 1/3 of the room, and the snake body with two arms was more oppressive than in his memory. The moment his feet hit the ground, Zero put down Rukia and slashed to the void and grabbed Ryuki Arisawa's arm, while Rukia rushed to Inoue's side to give her emergency treatment, and if the soul is out of the body for too long, people will really die. It was so hard that this was the first impression of Zirasuke's scaly arm on the snake's body, so he had to increase the release of spiritual pressure to cut it off. Just as he was about to catch Ryugi Arisawa, new tissue quickly grew on the broken wrist of the snake's weak body and attacked Zirasuke, and Zirasuke had to parry. At the same time, the thick tail of the lower body also whipped towards Zero, and Zero did not take this whip but stepped out a few steps with strength. But this void is more tricky, and it is indeed a little difficult to solve him without revealing his own solution. How's the situation on Inoue? It's already dangerous, it can't be delayed any longer, can you deal with it? Well, don't worry, leave it to me. Zero Mind thinks that it can't be delayed any longer. The virtual phase of this world is too resilient compared to the original, and he has no advantage in terms of speed, so it seems that he still has to use the ability to liberate. Zero thought about it for a while, and finally chose to use Rukia's slashing knife sleeve Shirayuki to create an illusion for Aizen that his power was triggered by Rukia, so he was able to use an ability similar to it. But the man named Aizen Yusuker was too smart, and he was on par with Kasuke Urahara. I don't know how long he could confuse him, so he could only take one step at a time. Ling Wu, Nameless Thousand Faces. Nameless Thousand Faces, the replicator sleeve snow, the ability to solve the ability to reduce the user's flesh to below the freezing point, everything it touches will be frozen, and the blade is just a part of the expansion of the freezing, reminding the current body that cannot withstand too low temperatures without practice. Please use with caution. Rukia, who was concentrating on using the ghost path to save Orihime Inoue, couldn't help but be stunned when she heard this liberation sentence. What? He began to explain. Obviously he had only just gained the power of death yesterday, until she watched the ordinary slashing knife change shape. The blade, handguard, and handle were all pure white. The blade was oval, there were 6 hollows, the front end of the handle was patterned, and the end was connected with a fluttering white ribbon. First dance, moon white. Ryugi Arisawa drew a circle on the ground with the tip of the sleeve white snow, and the snake body was completely shrouded by the circle, and it was in the frozen field of the sleeve white snow, and the huge icicle rose and swung out with a blow from Ryusuke, and the icicle wrapped the snake body and turned into ice slag and dissipated. How could you? Your knife? I'll talk about it when I'm done, I'll help Ichigo. Although Zero Jia has deliberately not lowered the temperature too low, the first use still brings a lot of burden to the body, and white gas keeps coming out of his mouth when he speaks. Far away in a room in the corpse soul realm, Aizen Sosuke observed with great interest the screen as Zero used his sleeve snow ability to prepare to solve the void, as if he had discovered a new toy. Captain Aizen? Ikamaru Jin's knock on the door, and although no one answered, he knew that Aizen had opened the door here. You. Is there something wrong with me? Ikamaru asked, but Aizen hesitated when he didn't respond. The Aizen in front of him is monitoring the present world through the monitor created by Hondama again, and the protagonist on the screen is not Kurosaki Ichigo, but Kurosaki Ryosuke. I remember that, Captain, you were originally interested in this weak Grim Reaper, who was originally there to observe that little imp who fused the Death Exterminator and the Void Power. Ikamaru Silver still couldn't help but ask, and this time Aizen responded to him. Weak, maybe, compared to the power contained in Kurosaki Ichigo. He is weak, he is funny, and he can always sabotage the task I gave Kurosaki Ichigo. Seeing Captain Aizen talking to him, his eyes lit up. Ikamaru Silver began to sympathize with the Grim Reaper kid, although he still didn't understand why that level of death could make Captain Aizen care so much. As the snake body in the screen was solved by Zirasuke, and the battlefield switched to Ichigo's side, Captain Aizen retracted his gaze with satisfaction and turned to Ikamaru Jin. I did have something to do with you. I haven't seen it since the morning. Do you know where he is? I don't know. Ikamaru Silver replied very quickly and crisply, and then added, I don't seem to know him well enough to know where he is at any time, Captain. We're companions, Silver. But if you see him, tell him I'm looking for him, and by the way, let him know that you can start preparing for that in advance. Why wasn't it supposed to be about a few months later? Ikamaru Jin couldn't help but ask the doubt in his heart when he heard Aizen say this. Aizen did not directly answer Ikamaru's question, but said something that made Ikamaru's confusion. You don't know, he's more interesting than what you see. Hurry up and do it. Understood, understood. Ikamaru Silver casually agreed, and then turned around and left the room. Looking at the back of Ikamaru Jin's departure, and confirming that the door was closed, Captain Aizen turned to look at the monitor again, muttering to himself. Shiba Zirasuke, if I knew that Shiba's family was so interesting, it would be a pity that I should have interfered in the original matter. Although Captain Aizen said words of pity, the corners of his mouth quietly rose. Episode 9. Aizen Sosuke's favorability has increased, currently at 1%, and a small amount of ghost comprehension is rewarded. However, at this time, Zero didn't know how much he was concerned about Aizen, and Aizen's favor rose to make him panic, but now he prioritized the need to solve the situation in front of him, and the system did not prompt him to complete the task after he eliminated the snake body. Ichigo, can you still hold it? Don't come here, I can do it myself. At the same time that Ichigo heard Zero's voice, he subconsciously burst out with stronger spiritual pressure, easily cutting the two mantis void sides. But the two voids cooperated with the attack to leave a chance for regeneration for his companions, so that the battle situation was still stalemate. Zero couldn't help but sigh at Ichigo's abundant spiritual pressure, and spoke. Ichigo can't do this, it's not staring at the one in front of you, you're like a fully open faucet now, trying to gather your power. 0. Jia exuded his spiritual pressure and then gathered it to demonstrate, and Ichigo felt the change in Zero Jia's spiritual pressure. Brother, is this? Ichigo held the huge slashing knife to instill spiritual pressure, and with a swing of the blade, he shot out the spiritual pressure slightly, and he could already faintly see the rudiments of the crescent moon sky, and the two mantis empty heads were shattered at the same time. At this time, Zero Jia still didn't receive the sound of the system prompting completion, and at the same time felt that there was a spiritual pressure gathering in the sky directly above, and Zero Jia looked up to see a snake with its mouth wide open, and the red spiritual pressure in its mouth was gathering. Damn, it's a void flash. Zero Jia quickly thought about countermeasures. Not too far away, the knife is not in a hurry, the spear can't cut the void flash and spread the damage caused by the spread, and the other slashing knives keep too much. It seems that there is only a ghost way, and Zero Jia sang the ghost path faster than before. The thundering chariot, the crack of the spinning wheel, this thing has light, and it is divided into 61 of the bound paths, 6 rods of light. O King's Landing, flesh and blood masks, all things that fly high with wings, and bear the name of men. Scorching heat and strife, rolling south across the sea, marching forward, 31 red artillery of the broken path. The 2 ghost paths only took half the time before to complete the chanting, and under the control of Zirosuke, 6 pieces of light blocked the mouth of the snake body, and the red cannon followed closely behind, directly detonating the snake body's void flash, which was still gathering, causing a huge explosion. The snake body that simply exploded its head and left its body had already dissipated when it fell, causing no further impact. The system prompt sounded at the right time, and Zero finally breathed a sigh of relief. This ordinary virtual ability to use virtual flashes was assumed by Zero Jia, but I didn't expect it to really appear. The main quest is completed, and the settlement rewards Kurosaki Ichigo, Inoue Orihime, and Kuchiji Rukia have their current favorability increased by 1%, Kurosaki Ichigo's current friendship is 2%, and Orihime Inoue's current friendship is 1%, and the reward is a small amount of upper body recovery speed. Rukia's current opinion is 3.5%, and a small amount of spiritual pressure is increased. Hint: in order to match the strength, the void that appears after the appearance has a void flash, and the strength of the void flash depends on the strength of the void itself. The main line will lose its cooldown and enter a dynamic activation state. After confirming the content of the system, Zero couldn't help but sigh, except for a small amount of rewards, due to the fact that the virtual generals were all equipped with virtual flashes. He even began to wonder if it was a wrong choice for him to grasp the first solution in advance. I can't help it, and it's useless to regret it now. Ryosuke muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, when Ichigo's voice interrupted his thoughts. Brother, do you see that? Un saw that it was like this, and you follow this feeling next time you try to launch the spiritual pressure. Shoot the spiritual pressure out. Ichigo muttered to himself thoughtfully, and then asked as he pointed to the nameless thousand faces in Reisuke's hand that had turned into a snow-white sleeve. By the way, brother, how did your knife change? You need to communicate with your sword and find its name so that it can become what it should be. Ryosuke patiently explained to Ichigo, although he knew that Ichigo's situation was special, and the power of death from Rukia that he was using now could not be liberated, because it was not his own sword, although his original moon slash was from the power of the exterminator. I always feel that my brother knows everything, as if you were originally a god of death. Then aren't you curious? It doesn't matter, I'll catch up with you so you don't have to be distracted thinking about my business. Forget it, let's go and see how Inoue and Longue are doing. After saying that, the two jumped up to the second floor, and when they saw that Rukia had just stopped the ghost path in her hand and wiped the sweat beads on her head, Ichigo took the lead in asking, how are they? It's not too much of a problem, I've dealt with all the injuries on my body, and tomorrow they will wake up with other memories to replace the memories of the night. Rukia stood up slowly, because of the continuous use of the broken path and the medical ghost path at night. The spiritual pressure and physical exertion were too great, and her body was tilted to the side, and when Zero saw this, she directly picked up Rukia with the princess hug. Rukia didn't refuse, but her face was slightly red, and Zero said, let's go back first. Yes. Rukia in her arms replied quietly. Ichigo on the side had an expression of whether he wanted to kill me or not to entertain the two of you, but he didn't speak, and he was also surprised that he felt that these two people were quite suitable. Ichigo thought to himself, he just didn't know if Zero Jia knew that the Grim Reaper had a long lifespan that was different from ordinary people, and he didn't know that Zero Jia was not a normal human now. During the journey, Rukia, who was in Zero's arms, still asked her most curious question. Why do you use the origin solution? Why do you have the same origin solution? Why is your origin solution like this? Rukia was going to directly say why your origin solution is the same as my sleeve snow, and you will also use the first dance moon white. And unlike Ichigo, who was not sensitive to spiritual pressure, Rukia obviously felt that Zero Jia was at least twice as strong as Zero Jia at this time, but she still didn't ask this question. At that time, I left and went to the Urahara store, and the manager taught me how to do it. Urahara manager, no, you can master the beginning in such a short time. No, how can you know Hatsu Shirayuki? And how can you know the 6 sticks of light prison? Is it also taught by the store manager? Rukia muttered to herself, and then found that she had more and more problems. I'll take a moment to talk to you. The 3 of them came to the front of Kurosaki's house. Ryosuke bent down and slowly verticalized his arms to the ground. Rukia landed on both feet. Sasuke also planned to stay with Rukia for dinner but was refused, seeing that the direction in which Rukia left should be going to the Urahara store. Seeing Ichigo and Zirosuke coming back, Ichishun failed to send a flying kick to Ichigo, and then said that it didn't matter if he didn't go home at night, and didn't ask the 2 of them why they went home late. And Ichigo didn't know at this time that Ichishun already knew that he had become a Grim Reaper. After a simple dinner, Zero Jia went to bed early. After all, he hadn't slept well in the past 2 days of fighting, and it didn't take long for him to fall asleep. In his sleep, Zero felt as if a person was sitting on one side of the bed, and he seemed to hear Rukia's voice and is half asleep and half awake. Hey Zero, I can't sleep. Zero rolled over and rubbed his eyes, only to see Rukia sitting on the edge of the bed with her back to him in a pink nightdress. Episode 10. Ryosuke squinted again and saw that the closet door was wide open, and he could see the quilt on the upper floor, and after thinking about it for a while, he realized that Rukia did not live in Ichigo's room, but in her own room. Zero looked at Rukia's petite body, and just sat up from the bed with a silent sigh. In fact, Zero Jia probably guessed what Rukia wanted to talk to him, and he also thought about telling Rukia everything, but it was too risky, and the outcome of everything would become unknown. And he doesn't have the ability to deal with that state of affairs, and Kurosaki Ichigo also hasn't been able to get a chance to grow and breathe, and the worst possibility is that the balance between the present world, the corpse soul realm and the void circle will collapse, and there will be a hell on the side. After facing the loss of life, Zero asked himself if he didn't have the courage to make a choice, and guarded the world in a softer way. Such a choice was destined for him to deceive the girl in front of him, who was at the center of a vortex far more dangerous than he knew, but could only let events unfold, even if it was possible death to greet her in this cruel world. Rukia noticed Zero Jia sitting up, and turned to look at him, but Zero looked away, not daring to meet the clear eyes, and Zero slowly spoke. You still want to ask those questions, right? Rukia just quietly looked at Zero and waited for his answer, and he said as he finished the final mental construction by taking a deep breath. Actually, I don't know why. After you gave me the power of the Grim Reaper, there were a lot of memories in my mind that didn't belong to me. It seems to be your memory. There is your life, the departure of your companions, the study of Mao Spiritual Academy, becoming a god of death and using the sword of slashing. Your sword is called Sleeve Shirayuki, right? Hatsumai Shirayuki also learned from memory. Memories transmitted through the power of the Grim Reaper? Rukia tilted her head and thought. Zero didn't want to dwell too much on the subject. He didn't like the feeling of deceiving others, and even more so because it was her. Are you going to leave when you've regained your strength? But I remember that the store manager Urahara said that it was a felony to pass on power to humans. Yes, I will take full responsibility, and I will not implicate them in you. Zero looked at Rukia's serious expression, and something seemed to be tingled in her body, even if she was so serious in this world. If anyone wants to punish you, I will go to the soul realm to save you as you saved my life. Rukia originally wanted to say that she didn't need to say such things to comfort me, but in the end she didn't say that she felt that Zero was serious. But how could he do it with his strength? And said with a smile, fools, don't talk stupidly, they will understand things like saving people's lives. The distance between the two is obviously as long as they reach out and hug each other into their arms, but they don't want to open their hearts as if they deliberately maintain a slight alienation. Go to bed early, have classes tomorrow. Yes, Rukia replied and went back to the closet and lay down and closed the door. Zero didn't lie down to rest immediately, but stared at the moonlight outside the window in a daze. Rukia's opinion has increased by 1%, and the current opinion rating is 4.5%. After hearing the system prompt, Zero lay down, closed his eyes and began to rest, just as a white parrot with red spots on its cheeks flew out of the window. At noon on the second day, Rukia, Ichigo, and Ryosuke sat side by side against the iron railing on the roof of the school building, eating lunch together. Speaking of which, the wound is really healed, Ichigo said with milk in his left hand and a scab on his forehead with his right hand, which was one of the few wounds left on his body last night. You're only surprised now? Of course, my ghost grades have always been at the top level. Treating an injury of this magnitude is a breeze. Rukia couldn't hide the smugness on her face, and her mouth was stuffed with red bean bread. Grades? Does the Grim Reaper have a school? Well, it's pretty much the same. How do you drink this? Rukia asked, looking at a carton of apple juice over and over again, and Zero took the juice from Rukia's hand, inserted it into a straw, and then sent it back to her. The straw is in the back, just plug it in through the hole above. Oh. Rukia nodded earnestly. At this time, Kojima Mizus, Kigo Asano, and Chado Taihu also walked onto the roof together, and Mizus took the initiative to say hello. The three of you are staying together again. It looks like you're in a good relationship. Please, just have lunch together. How can you come to this conclusion? Ichigo argued, and Mizus pointed to Zero and Rukia, who were interacting next to him. You're obviously just in passing, really, Ichigo. I think you should learn to read words and emotions occasionally, right? You're really sluggish in this regard. Mizus sat down next to Ichigo and said with a smile, if I cared about this kind of thing, I would have dyed my hair black, although I know what you mean. Ichigo glanced at the two people next to him and said, that's right. Speaking of Chado, how did you get it? Why are you full of injuries on your head and body? Is your house the same as Inoue, a big steel bar falling from the sky? Asked Kigo Asano to Chado. The injury on the head is due to the fact that the steel bar fell from it yesterday. Steel rebar. The hand is because when I was just buying bread, I collided head-on with a motorcycle. That's why you came back so late. Kigo muttered, and Shueisei smiled wryly. Forget it, as long as you are not seriously injured, your body is still as incredible as ever. He's a tin man. Ichigo was a rare participant in the discussion. Chado's hand collided head-on with the motorcycle and was only bruised, and his head was not injured by falling steel bars. Ryosuke always remembered that Chado was a strong body as an ordinary person, so he wasn't as surprised as the others, and Ryosuke just thought to himself that it seemed that the main quest was about to start again. Ichigo was about to discuss with Zero because he heard what happened in Inoue, and it turned out that their memories were really replaced, but together with Rukia, they were attracted by the spiritual pressure behind Chado. Oh, where did this bird come from? Is it a parrot? Kigo asked, looking at the birdcage behind Chado, who lifted the birdcage in front of him. Hello everyone. My name is Yuichi Shibata. What is the name of my big brother? Said the white parrot with a red dot on his cheek named Yuichi Shibata, looking at Kigo. The main quest is opened, protect Yuichi Shibata and destroy all the void that followed him, then bury his soul. Reward Chado Taihu, Kurosaki Ichigo, and Rukia Kuchiki with friendship and a small amount of spiritual pressure, and if you fail, you will die. The voice of the system sounded in Zero's head, and he also sensed that it was all, and there was only one murderer in the original story, and it seemed that it was not an easy errand.